Hey y'all, welcome back to the Brianna Approved podcast. We have such an inspirational and influential guest on the podcast today. I am so excited to have Dr. John Douillard, who is a globally recognized leader in the field of natural health, Ayurveda, sports medicine, and has been teaching Ayurvedic wisdom for over 40 years. He is the creator of LifeSpa.com, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern medicine. LifeSpa.com is one of the leading Ayurvedic health and wellness resources on the web, with over 11 million views on YouTube and over 130,000 newsletter subscribers. Dr. John is also the person that I originally learned all of the information about Ayurvedic medicine from, so I'm beyond excited and honored to have him on today. He is the former director of player development for the New Jersey Nets. Dr. John, you don't know this, but I'm a Jersey girl, so we love that. Author of 7 health books, including his newest Amazon bestseller, Eat Wheat, and he's also the host of the LifeSpa podcast. So he also directs the LifeSpa Ayurvedic Clinic and in 2013 Holistic Wellness Center of the Year in Boulder, Colorado. Dr. John, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to have you today.
Well, it's good to be here, Brianna. Thank you so much for having me.
You are actually my first Ayurvedic expert that I am having on the podcast, and I am beyond grateful because Ayurvedic principles has been something that I've used for my own health, for people in my practice, and I just think it's a great way to kind of interpose, Western and Eastern medicine. So because you're the first expert, I want to sort of take a little bit of a step back and sort of create a baseline archetype for my listeners to kind of develop like a deeper understanding of some of the main tenets or fundamental principles of Ayurvedic medicine. So I would love to hear from your point of view the differences between not only just the 3 main doshas and Ayurvedic body types, but why this is important for kind of creating different lifestyle modifications, what we would call sort of, biochemical individuality, and how this impacts not only, how you should be eating, but also I think I learned a lot of interesting things for different herbs for different, body types. So would love to just kind of hear your top line explanation of that.
I think the best way to start is that, circadian medicine now has won the Nobel Prize, and it's basically about aligning our biological clocks and nature's circadian rhythms. And for most of us, they're not in sync at all anymore for many, many reasons. A disconnect from the light dark cycles, toxins, environmental pollutants, lifestyle, crazy things, And Ayurveda, Ayur means life, Veda means science of, so it's the science of life. So it's really a science about if you bring the body back into balance, the rhythms of nature with the biological clocks, then the body kind of takes care of itself and heals itself. And the 3 body types, they call them Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, are really just reflections of what you see in nature. Vata is cold and dry, very much like the winds and coldness of winter. So you probably know people who have a lot of winter in their body type. They're always putting the covers on and wearing a jacket and always cold all the time. Then there's the spring body type, which is we call kapha, and that's when the earth holds on to more water. It's a rainy, muddy, allergy time of the year. And people who have more of those spring qualities tend to get more congested. They tend to hold on to more water, gain more weight, and they're more easygoing and calm because they're heavier in nature, sort of governed by earth and water. And the Pitta body type, which is a summer quality, it means fire. In the summer, it's hot. So people who are fiery and hot and competitive and driven and throwing pots and pans and more anger and heartburn and skin rashes and things like that, those people who have a Pitta body type are more vulnerable to those kinds of things. So the way it works is that we all have a little bit of all those 3 major principles of nature, and how much of those we get determines our constitutional type, which determines, if we're going to really like the summer, if we're really a hot body type in a hot season, eating hot, spicy food and anything fermented like wine, cheese, and beer and coffee is going to increase the acidity, then that's only going to overheat or stack those Pitta qualities. So it's really a simple thing. Nature said, well, I know it's hot. and I'm going to give you cooling fruits and vegetables to cool it down. And that will balance you, right? So nature said, I'm going to give you the heat, but I'm going to give you the antidote of that heat in the harvest. I'm going to give you cold and dryness in winter, but I'm going to give you nuts and seeds like the squirrels eat to antidote the coldness and dryness of winter with these warm, heavy, sweet foods. In the springtime, when it's rainy, muddy, congested, and allergy season, nature gives us no pasta, no pizzas harvested. It's simply leafy greens and bitter roots and dandelions and things like that are very austere. In fact, people eat less. It's a calorie restricted sort of fasting time of the year. And that's because, when you have you're holding on to a lot of water weight and heaviness and congestion. If you eat less, and definitely less congestive foods, you're going to be okay. So nature wouldn't want to stack, a congested, vulnerable body type in a very congestive season with a bunch of congested mucus making pizza and pasta. So it doesn't give you pizza and pasta at that time because, again, nature gives us the antidote to the extreme of each season in the harvest. So that's sort of the general principles that you understand your type. You get a sense of, I'm a really pitta, fiery body type. I better be careful in the summer months eating a bunch of barbecue and, hot, spicy food and coffee and wine, cheese, and beer. All those things will heat me up. And I got to be careful about that. That might be okay in the winter when it's cold. Nature's on my side. So it's just a simple, logical understanding of nature and how nature provided foods in season that actually really support us and balance us and keep our biological clocks and circadian rhythms in balance. And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful explanation. And I believe on your website you have a quiz that people can take to kind of get a baseline for, because I'm sure people are going to hear that and be like, well, what am I? And I know some people have an idea, but I think it's important for people to know, like, yes, there's a combination of these three, but I probably am predominant in one of these. And to your point, it can be helpful to know, especially when we're transitioning to seasons and all of that, what should I be eating more or less of, or how can I support my body type? So I think one of the actual first books that I read of yours, I don't remember if it was Eat Wheat or if it was the Three Seasons Diet, but both of those were really profound in my, I think, earlier years of learning. And I think you were one of the first people to talk about just how intuitively, to your point, in the summer, you don't come inside and be like, I want a bowl of soup right now. Like your body kind of has some of this innate wisdom. And I believe in your book, you had talked about how it was either the soil produced different enzymes or there were certain animals that produced different enzymes as well. Is that something that, you have seen the science of that evolve at all? Or is that something that, you could explain a little bit more about for the why eating seasonally is so important?
Yeah, well, there are good studies. A Stanford study showed that the hunter-gatherer tribe, the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, they had completely different bugs in their gut in different seasons. And they also did studies and found out that the bugs in the soil everywhere changed dramatically from one season to the next to the next. So we have bugs in our gut called actinobacteria in the springtime that are really good at delivering energy from fat and fiber because there's no carbohydrates harvested in the spring. And in the fall, the bugs change. If you eat seasonally, you eat the bugs that are in season, you change and inoculate your gut with a completely different stable of bugs. And at the end of the summer, when all the pastas and fruits and vegetables are being harvested, the carbohydrates, you get what are called bacteriodiets, which are really good at delivering sugar into the blood and into your cells. So we have an epidemic of, pre-diabetes in our country, which creates weight gain and a whole bunch of chronic degenerative concerns. And one of the problems is that we eat the same food all year long, and that never happened on the planet Earth ever before until now, because we have refrigerators and trucking and all that. So the idea is that if you ate what was actually in season, and we actually provide, I wrote a book called The Three Season Diet, which is all about that, but unfortunately, when we wrote the book, The Three Season Diet, everybody thought that I didn't know there were 4 seasons, so didn't go as well as we hoped, that book, although it's, I think, still a really cool book. The 4th season is the dormant season of winter. So there's 3 harvests in nature that we interact with nature from. There's a spring harvest, a summer harvest, a fall harvest for winter eating. And winter, generally speaking, is dormant. Nature always takes a rest. Every system has a cycle of rest and activity, right? So that's why we call it the 3-season diet, because we're interacting with those 3 seasons. So there's 3 grocery lists that you get. and one for winter, summer, spring, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and you circle the foods on that grocery list that you like, and then give yourself permission to eat more of those foods. And that was what the book was about, of course, a little bit more than that. But I actually put together something called the 3-Season Diet Eating Guide, which is a free, every month you get in your inbox, a grocery list, superfood list, herbs, and all the newest, latest research on the seasonal research in your inbox for every month of the year. It's for free service that we give so people can get acquainted with actually eating what they probably want. Like you said, I want a soup in the winter, I want a salad in the summer. Well, that is logical. And we know that the enzymes, for example, you mentioned enzymes, at the end of the summer, there's an enzyme called amylase. Amylase is an enzyme that we use to digest starch. Well, you produce, I produce, we all produce more of this enzyme in our body in the fall than we do in the spring. So we really are circadian beings. Even to this day in our modern world, we still produce more of the enzyme called amylase when the starches are being harvested, even though we eat it 365 days of the year and we completely ignored these cycles. We still are connected to those rhythms. And that's what I mean when I say biological clocks and circadian rhythms. They have to be in sync. And when they are, good things happen. When they're not, then we know that that's one of the major and really kind of emerging areas in science where they're looking at the link between kind of a biological clock imbalance and many of the chronic degenerative diseases and unnecessary aging factors, actually.
Yeah, that book was the first book that I had read something like that on, and it was so eye-opening to me because, again, I think it was something that I was inherently doing. And I think a lot of European cultures are a bit better at doing this. And I think with, America, sometimes, to your point, we can get strawberries in the middle of winter, and you're like, this maybe isn't always, the most natural thing. But I think also, and I do subscribe to that guide. I do get it, and I love it. And we're going to put it in the show notes. So it is a great guide. Another part that I know you've talked about is this idea, and a lot of people know the idea of emotions in Chinese medicine and dealing with organs, and I've talked a lot about this on my show as well, but emotions of Ayurveda, especially when there's changes of the seasons, again, I think intuitively people will kind of half joke and make some cheeky remarks being like, oh, it's seasonal depression and all of that. But I know on your website, you talked about, there was this line that said, if one doesn't change their diet and lifestyle according to the seasonal changes, the door to ill health remains open. And that was really stuck with me because I think people don't always put the two of those together, or they can't always understand, again, like, oh yeah, maybe I should eat differently, but why is my mood changing? So can you talk a little bit about sort of the transition from one to another? I don't want to butcher the name for what that's actually called, and sort of, why this is important to be aware of, and maybe some tips for somebody to be thinking about when those transitions are happening.
Yeah, no, it's a great concept, something that we know very little about, in the West. In Ayurveda, it's called Ritu Sandhi, which is the change of the seasons. And they actually say in the Vedic texts that the change of the season, if you don't do it correctly, change your diet from one to the other, that's when disease takes its first foothold. I'll give you an example. In the summertime, we have a lot of sun. And the sun produces serotonin through receptors in our skin. And we make these really beautiful hormones. So we always tend to be happier. Well, seasonal affective disorder, we all know, is probably due to a lack of the sun, therefore UVB radiation, therefore vitamin D. So everybody takes vitamin D in the winter to help mitigate that, which is a good idea. But nature does more than that. There are root vegetables, herbs, like an herb called bacopa, an herb called ashwagandha, herbs that actually are natural precursors to GABA and serotonin, natural, neurotransmitters that support mood stability. And they are harvested in the fall for winter eating. So these warm, heavy, sweet roots that you have to harvest in the fall, they've been growing all summer, you harvest them, and then you have them and they store all winter. You can make soups and teas out of them, and they provide you that nutritional value to balance your nervous system, to give you that mood stability and give you those hormones that you need. Another example of that is, when you every winter, I know when I grew up, we'd always get oranges from Florida because that's where they came from. And they would always come in the wintertime. And and a lot of the citrus vegetables are harvested in the winter. Turns out that what the studies show that those citrus vegetables, an herb called amalaki, which is the Ayurvedic version of that, it's like more vitamin C than these little berries got more vitamin C than an orange by like 10 times. And it shows that the vitamin C in those berries actually provide an antioxidant benefit that actually protects your fats from going rancid. And if the fats did go rancid, it would actually reconstitute them. Now, fats are interesting. When you take a seed, which is where the fats live, they don't live in a bottle in the grocery store. They live inside seeds, and it's dark in there. You crack the seed, light goes in, the oil goes rancid quickly, just like that. So in the old days, they would make oils in the dark of the night and put them in dark bottles and deliver them like milk bottles at 4 in the morning. And then they process the heck out of them. They put them on shelves, and you use them as cooking oil. That was supposed to, all those polyunsaturated cooking oil, saturated fats, they were supposed to reverse heart disease. They kind of didn't do that, but they did make foods on the shelf last a lot longer. So the whole inside of your grocery store is based on the fact that those processed oils can be put in a loaf of bread, and that loaf of bread never goes bad anymore. It doesn't even get hard anymore. Like when I grew up, bread would get hard in a couple of days or a day, and that's why bakeries made a living, because they had to bake bread every day because it would get hard if you didn't put processed stuff into it or preservatives into it. So the bugs on the counter that eat oil won't eat the oil in that bread because they put all that stuff to make it last on the shelf longer. It doesn't extend your life, just the shelf life. And when you eat those oils, all those oils go to the garbage can, which happens to be your liver, and they create liver congestion and bile sludge. And now we have the number one abdominal surgery in America is taking your gallbladder out. So these fats that are so important for us, that are important particularly in the winter time, because winter is a cold, dry time where you get more anxious and more worried and more restless and insomnia. And in the winter when it's cold and dry, governed by air, you want to calm the nervous system down. Well, fats, like the nuts in the squirrels, that the nuts and the seeds that the squirrels eat, those fats are insulating and calming for the nervous system. But if those fats go rancid, they don't work. So nature had a plan, and the plan was, let me give you the citrus at this time of the year at the same time to protect those fats from going rancid, because they calm your nervous system. They also govern all your hormones, they govern all your neurotransmitters, and they also govern the wall of every cell in your body, which is like critical, right? So this is a beautiful example of how we know that the bugs in the soil change from season to season. We know the enzymes in our body change from season to season. And all we got to do is just take that grocery list, circle the foods we like, eat more of those foods. You don't need only eat seasonal food. You can eat other foods too, but make sure you're getting medicinal dosage of what nature had in store for us to keep us in balance.
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to put a link to that in the show notes because it's one of my favorite guides that is provided. Yeah. I think I was listening to a lecture from Todd Caldecott. I'm not sure if you're aware of him. He's a holistic practitioner as well, and he speaks a bit about Ayurveda. And I remember him talking about different herbs, specifically aggravating or being more beneficial for certain dosha types. And I had never heard of that. I've studied herbalism for a really long time and, and have done a lot of research on it. So just like we eat seasonally, and I know, there are certain herbs that are harvested at certain times of the year, like ashwagandha for the root and things like that. Are there things that you've noticed from, I know, you have your own supplements and they're amazing and the formulations are great, but should people be aware of that if they have potentially a proclivity for a certain dosha and they're very, let's say, very pitta, and maybe they're using something like an ashwagandha, which could be potentially more stimulating for somebody, like maybe that's not the herb for them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've written many articles on my website at LifeSpa.com about herbs for spring, herbs for summer, herbs for winter, and why are they for those seasons? Because they're harvested right before those seasons. And that's what you want to do is you want to, as you get more into this, you start to align yourself with seasonal foods, seasonal herbs, and it makes sense. Like the herb everybody knows about nowadays is called ashwagandha. It's a fall harvested, heavy, warm, sweet root. And that heavy, warm, sweet root helps protect your nervous system, balance your nervous system from stress, even helps you sleep deeper and better. So there are foods and that same herb, ashwagandha, because it's warm, heavy, and sweet, it's heavier. So in the summertime, when it's hot, it may not be the best herb, particularly if your body type is hot and now you're eating, you know, you know, spicy food and beer, wine, cheese, and a lot of, acid producing foods like coffee. And now you're adding herbs that are also kind of very heating, or herbs that are harvested in the fall for winter eating are going to be warmer for you. Herbs that are harvested in the spring, like an herb called neem and an herb called brahmi, which are great for your nervous system and your skin, and they'll cool you down in the summertime. So there are herbs for definitely each season. Turmeric, ginger are really good in the fall to kind of swab up all the mucus that we produce and the tendency to hold on to water that happens in the springtime. So yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the seasonal approach to eating, is understanding that there's herbs and medicines and foods that all can be aligned with, and help us get better in sync with those natural rhythms. And when you do that, the body starts to be able to, there's less confusion and chaos in your body. The body can recognize problems as problems more easily and fix them more easily without having to depend on a pill or a powder to do the job for you, or a medication that does the job for you as well.
And have you seen different herbs, depending on your dosha, be more beneficial? Or again, like I always tell people, just because it's good doesn't mean it's good for you. So have you sort of seen that? Or do you sort of see a general type with, if you are very, pitta or very kapha, then you generally tend to be okay with this kind of herb, or just something to be aware of?
It's definitely something I still see patients, and I'm always aware of their constitution. I'm aware of the season that they're in, and I'm aware of the herb that I would prescribe for them for whatever imbalance that they had. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't prescribe ashwagandha in the summer. I could, but it wouldn't be for someone who had a hot body type, breaking out with rashes, with heartburn and indigestion, all these heat-related conditions. If I gave them an herb like ashwagandha, which is a heat-boosting herb, it's probably not going to be digested as well as I would like. The other thing is interesting is that the digestion is stronger. In studies have shown this, that the digestion is stronger in the winter. So we can eat nuts, seeds, grains. If you're going to survive, you'd have to hunt more in the winter because there's nothing coming out of the ground. And those are heavier foods that require strong digestive strength. In the summertime, the food is cooked on the vine. And if you eat if you have to heat the body up to cook it, then that's, again, adding more heat to cook the food, eating hot foods, heavy foods, and a hot body type in a hot season that could overheat you and create an imbalance, right? So the idea was nature would cook the food on the vine for you, and then you could just pick the apple off the tree and eat it, and it would actually cool you down, and it already has been cooked on the vine without having to be cooked inside of you. And that's one of the ways why human beings, and I'm talking about Homo sapiens versus the Neanderthals, survived, because we, as Homo sapiens, because we stayed in Africa longer and we learned to persistence hunt and run and deal with heat in a much more efficient manner, we have the ability to dissipate heat and better than any other creature, really. We can pretty much outrun anything if you're in shape for that, believe it or not. And that's just one of the things that we have that ability to do, is dissipate heat better. So understanding your body type and the tendency to without any understanding of how nature planned all this, eating a bunch of hot, spicy food, barbecue, wine, cheese, beer, pizza, all this stuff in the summertime, that could be heating, and coffee that's very heating on a hot body type that's already aggravated with heartburn and skin rashes and aggravation and throwing pots and pans, and then you cool them down with foods that are in season, and so it makes a world of difference.
Yes. And that's so important for people to understand, even herbal energetics, because to your point, like there are certain herbs that are more warming and circulating or cooling herbs. And so I think that also is a nice segue into this time of the year, supporting the liver and the lymphatic system. We should be doing it all the time. But I think in the summer, people maybe they're drinking more, or they're eating foods that potentially could be, they're barbecuing and all of that. And I know, I think when I originally learned about lymphatic health, it was via a lot of your articles, and because I know Ayurvedic medicine talks a lot about the study of the lymph being connected with the study of longevity. So what are some of your favorite ways to move the lymph and support the lymphatic and liver system for optimal health, since those are two of my favorite systems?
Yeah, I mean, in Ayurveda, there's a branch of Ayurveda that's called Rasayana, which is the study of longevity, basically. And Rasa means lymph, and Ayana means the study of. So it's the study of the lymph, which we don't do much of in Western medicine unless you get diagnosed with cancer or something. Then we're all about the lymph. But the lymph is the drainage system of the body. It's trying to take the trash out. It's also carrying your immune system. It's also helping you deliver properly broken down fat and protein to every cell of your body for baseline energy. Whenever you have an immune event like COVID or a vaccine, studies have now shown that significantly affected the lymphatic flow of the body, particularly the newly discovered lymphs in the brain that dump 3 pounds of plaque out of your head every year while you sleep. So you have lymph under your skin. When you break out, that's the skin-associated lymph being activated as an exit ramp for impurities because the rest of the detox pathways are blocked. And you have brain fog or migraine headaches or tiredness or lethargy, or even an immune compromised event. That could be congestion of the brain's what's called lymphatic system. And there are techniques to kind of clean all that out. Always remember that the lymphatic system starts in your digestion. So I'll tell you what to do for the lymph, but you also want to make sure you're not shoveling snow in a snowstorm. In other words, you want to go evaluate the upstream digestive issue. And that's why I wrote Eat Wheat. I wrote Eat Wheat, which is a book not so much about eating wheat, but that wheat is a hard to digest grain, protein, and it's a canary in the coal mine. If you can't digest it, it may be suggesting that there's an underlying digestive issue there. And if you would fix that instead of just taking the wheat out of the diet, you actually might be way better off, because the wheat and other hard to digest things, which we've been told to bubble wrap our diet of late, don't eat nightshades or goitrogens or oxalates or phytic acids or lectins, and don't eat anything that's hard to digest. Well, studies now show that those harder to digest foods create a little bit of an irritation. It's called hormesis, which doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. And the reason you and I have gut immunity is because we eat, and have been for millions of years, things that are a little harder to digest, right? We weren't so picky back in the day, right? We had to eat whatever we could, and we have a gut immunity because of that. So studies show when you stop eating those foods, and one study with wheat said if you ate wheat, and maybe you weren't celiac, but you didn't have to, you ate wheat, but you didn't have celiac. And then you have folks that didn't eat wheat and they didn't have celiac. So there are wheat eaters and there were the non-wheat eaters, but they didn't have celiac. The wheat eaters had 4 times less mercury in their blood than the non-wheat eaters. They also had significantly more good bugs, less bad bugs, and more killer T cells than the folks that were actually not eating wheat. And there's many more studies beyond that. But the point is that those harder to digest foods provide a level of stimulus for an immune reaction. And without that reaction, you end up getting lymphatic congestion. And it is an interesting study to look at what happened after COVID and after vaccines. And the studies are clear on that direct connection to the brain lymphatic system for months and months after COVID and months after the vaccine, which means that the master computer, which is trying to send immune fire trucks to the fire on Main Street, when it's congested, it can't get its trash out. 3 pounds per year we dump out of our head through those lymphs. If you can't get the trash out, the brain doesn't know how many fire trucks to send to the fire on Main Street. It can send 1, 100, and that can cause all types of immune compromise issues, including fatigue and long haul COVID. So that research is in, and it's an interesting study to look at what's happened to our digestion. Everybody's saying, don't eat, only eat meat and vegetables because they're easier to digest. Will make you feel good for a while, but they won't solve the underlying weak link in your digestion. It's true, pesticides on wheat and other foods will kill the bugs in your mouth and digestion that literally make the enzymes to help you digest hard to digest things like wheat and dairy. So there are more reasons but you got to troubleshoot the digestive imbalance and fix it. And not just like you say, well, don't eat this, because you'll go down the road of first I stop eating wheat, then dairy, then nuts, then seeds, then grains, then lectins, then nightshades. Next thing you know, there's not a lot to eat. Next thing you know, you're trying to be a raw vegan because there's nothing else to eat. And that's not going to work for you long term either. So it's an interesting study to understand the upstream cause of these lymphatic issues. But let me get to the lymph treatments for you real quick. There's an herb called Mangista, which is my favorite Ayurvedic herb for the lymph. It's a red root. And they used to use it for dyeing clothes back in the day. So anything that would dye your clothes red, like a blueberry or a blackberry or a strawberry, or anything like that, or even beets, anything that has those dyes, those red or blue or black dyes, they have a lot of antioxidants which work through the lymphatic system. So those are all going to be good lymphatic movers. Green things, which are going to be more alkaline, are going to be lymphatic movers. Exercise is going to be a lymphatic mover. Hydration, critical lymphatic mover. Not too much. People are overhydrating these days more than underhydrating. A lot of folks will be careful about not drinking too much water because that can be a problem as well. And then once you fix the lymph system, then you want to, and daily Ayurvedic massage is a powerful technique for the skin-associated lymph as well. All these things are phenomenally good, but always make sure you've gone back and troubleshot your weak link in your digestion. And don't ignore that because the problem will just come right back.
Absolutely. There's so much evidence now that talks about having microbial diversity in your gut microbiome through various plant compounds and how that's really quite beneficial systemically for your health. And I think people hyperfixating on certain diets, how again that leads to less microbial diversity. Your book, the Eat Wheat book, was one of the first books that opened my eyes to introducing that back in, because at that point, that's when I think, and this was, years ago, like, I don't remember when you published that book, but I want to say it was like 8+ years ago I read this book. And at that time, it was like gluten-free everything and paleo everything. And that was very popular, that narrative at the time. And I had a lot of clients who were just taking digestive enzymes like it was candy. And that's when I also learned a lot about the idea of digestive bitters and kind of helping to support your liver and lymph that way. So I love that you spoke about that. And I think having strong digestive fires, as they say, is so important for not only, your physical health, but also your emotional health. Like what are we digesting in life and not digesting?
There was a study done, it was another Stanford study done in a museum in New Mexico, and they figured out a way to measure the poop from these ancient humans 1,000 years old that were in museums. And they compared that ancient poop to modern poop. And there was such a level of microbial diversity in the guts of modern humans compared to these ancient humans that they literally are calling that lack of microbial diversity an extinction event. And so we have to do everything we can to support digestive strength and microbial diversity. I eat as much organic food as I can, but when I go to the grocery store, sometimes I might buy a thing of organic spinach that comes in those plastic containers, whatever, right? And that's just been grown in the same soil again and again and again. It's on a conveyor belt. It's better than pesticides for sure, but is the microbial diversity really in that plant? No, you're getting the same bugs every time you eat that same spinach, But that's why I love using what we call whole organic herbs, because the herbs that come out of the ground, particularly in different parts of the world, in different soils, are going to have a vast diversity of microbes. And the way to inoculate your gut with new bugs for that season is to eat herbs and foods that are actually in season. Like mangista is a great spring, summer herb. And when you eat it, you're taking a root that is specifically attracted to certain bugs. So the bugs in the soil, which surge in the spring, are going to be attracted to the roots of certain plants. And there's a synergy between those two. It's called nutrient synergy. And when you take the bugs that go onto the root of that plant, they have a specific effect on that plant. And that effect can actually increase the growth rate of the plant, the immunity of the plant, the strength, the potency, and lifespan of that plant. So we now know, this is all emerging science, that when you actually eat food, the bugs are so critically important to making that food work for you. And we've been spraying them for decades and decades now. And even the herbs that we take oftentimes are extracts, and which make them sterile because they've been soaked in alcohol. So the herbs are potent chemically, but they're sterile microbiologically. And that's what we don't do at LifeSpa. All our herbs are whole plants with all the microbes together, where you get the natural nutrient synergy and what are called bacterial endophytes, those bugs that live on those plants that actually make the plant function so much better as a medicine for you, as well as inoculating your gut and creating more microbial diversity. It's something we don't think about, but it's actually, if I took all the bugs out of you and sterilized your gut, you'd be a completely different person. And that's what our food has been doing to us for the last, 50, 60, 70 years. And that's a bit of a problem, right? So that's why looking for things that help inoculate, not just give me the herb with the most power that's been 100 times potency and it's sterile. That acts like a drug, like you get on the TV commercials. There's always going to be a consequence for taking that kind of a herb or a drug. The drug may be more severe consequences, but there's always going to be a consequence. But when you take the whole plant with the natural microbiome, this is something that we've been eating and digesting for millions of years. We're good at that. And that's why it doesn't interact, doesn't cause problems, and they're really safe. So just be careful when you're just taking herbs and supplements and with, super concentrated X, Y, Z, bottles and bottles of pills, all different things. You have no idea what they are, came out of a laboratory. They can medicinally help you, and they have their place. But at the end of the day, you want to get to the upstream cause, which is that, like you said, that lack of diversity in your gut and that lack of connection of the rhythms in your body and natural rhythms, that they all matter more than anything.
Absolutely. Full spectrum botanicals is something that I feel like is missed on a lot of people, because to your point, we always think that if a little is good, then more must be better. And if this is the one constituent that's been studied, then let's 10x it. And for certain herbs, I think it makes sense but for a lot of the times it doesn't. But since we are in the spring I guess we're more in the summer now, do you have a favorite, food or herb right now that you're loving to kind of increase this time of the year, since we are in summer mode? What's currently on the Dr. John rotation?
Yeah, the one herb there's two herbs that are just phenomenal. There's a handful, but the two that I would suggest, one is an herb called neem, which is harvested in the spring all the way to the fall. And that is something that has been shown, well, they actually call it the village pharmacy in India, because for any condition, you got neem because it would cure anything. It was that potent. But why it works is because it actually is very antagonistic for any bad bugs proliferating in your gut. It heals the skin on the inside, your gut, as well as the outside, and it proliferates the proliferation of good bugs in your gut. So it's an amazing herb to heal the inner skin, and that's where really the rubber meets the road. And there's another herb called Brahmi that I grow in my garden, and it's a beautiful little leaf. It's Centella asiatica. It's the name of the herb, and it's an herb for main brain function, brain lymphatic drainage, mental clarity, focused memory, and it's also a collagen precursor, so it's good for the skin on the outside. We actually put it in our Ayurvedic skincare line, as well as healing the skin on the inside. It's even shown to be cooling enough and healing the skin enough to actually reverse, heartburn and GERD and reflux and things like that. So those are really two herbs you might want to think about. Brahmi, we have something called Brahmi Brain on my website, LifeSpa.com, and also the Neem Boost, which are two herbs that you might want to think about to give you those bugs, but give you that cooling benefit during the summer months.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, last question, and then we can tell everybody where they can follow you, how they can get your amazing products. I know, and I'm going to butcher the name, but I know there's a daily ritual of self-care in Ayurvedic. I believe it's called Dinakara. Is that how you say it?
Dinacharya.
Dinachara, okay. And with that, I believe that some of the main pillars, the 3 pillars of Ayurveda, is eat, sleep, love, or some places I've read it where it's food, sleep, sex. So are there any of the pillars that you think maybe if there's like a triage of sorts that are important, or how people can kind of start to develop a self-care ritual while also being aware of some of these pillars for sort of creating this sort of balanced, optimal life?
Yeah, I mean, to make it really simple, I would say try to get up early and be there for the sunrise when this day starts. Our ancestors, every one of them did that for millions of years. We don't. So that would be a good start. And there's incredible benefit in getting outside and getting that infrared light in the morning. As long as the shadow that the sun makes is longer than you are tall, you're getting almost all red and infrared light, which is very, very healing for your body, and no UV radiation, which can potentially, at high levels, high amounts, be more damaging. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would actually be 2 hours or so after meal, have a breakfast. There's so many studies that show that we should eat something to start our metabolic activity in the morning. So you can get up with the sun, exercise, yoga, breathe, do different things, and then try to have a breakfast. It doesn't have to be a lot, but something to tell your body day is started. And then the middle of the day, the studies show that's when the biological clocks for digestion turn on. And then in the evening, the old name for dinner was supper or supplemental or soup. So it was always historically a light meal, and the big meal was in the middle of the day. Now I know in our intermittent fasting world that we live in, everybody skips breakfast and has a cup of coffee, and then they have breakfast and a dinner. And you can lose weight that way, but if you really want to align your biological clocks with nature's rhythms, you want to have a bigger meal in the middle of the day. And then maybe the most important thing, because maybe some of you aren't going to have a breakfast 2 hours after you wake up, then that can be whatever you need to get you to lunch without feeling hunger. Lunch is a big enough meal to get you to dinner without feeling hunger, and dinner should be light and supplemental and smaller and earlier if possible. And then in the evening, try to get yourself to go to bed early so you are sleeping in a way where you wake up before the sun rises. And that's kind of the name of the game. So think about, a bigger lunch and give it a try and see how you feel. And then maybe the most important thing is after your meal, there's something in Ayurveda called Shata Pavali, which means take 100 steps after every meal. It's a traditional thing to do. Well, it turns out that if you eat a big meal and then go sit on the couch and watch a movie and don't move, that is the very worst thing you can do for your heart and your arteries and your blood sugar. And studies show if you eat the meal and then eat the meal in a relaxed way, take a little rest for a little while, and then go for a walk, that is golden because the blood vessels really take a beating, taking all that food from digestion into the arteries, getting all that nutrition. It's a lot of work for your arterial levels lining. And when you go for a walk, that actually stimulates that circulation to the tune of actually being able to get the sugar out of your blood without even using insulin. In other words, when you go for a walk after a meal, the body will just directly deliver the sugar into your cells without even the need of insulin. Which means that it takes such a the blood sugar spike we all talk about after a meal. It so dramatically mitigates that for you. So that's the most important thing. 3 meals a day, make supper lighter, lunch bigger, walk after your meals, get up with the sun, and go to bed early. You do those things, you're going to see a difference for sure. And of course,
love that.
try to eat seasonally. Try to think about eating more in line with what nature provides, because we're changing beings. We're not just the same person every day of the year. We're morphing. The bugs are morphing. We think we're independent of that, but we're not.
That's probably what attracted me to Ayurvedic medicine originally, was because it's, again, these things that I think intuitively we know or have some sense of, but the science behind it and this ancient science, it really just makes sense and kind of, completes it closed circle. And I think you do such a beautiful job of taking the Ayurvedic principles and then interposing some science. So, Dr. John, I appreciate your time and your wisdom on this show so much, and from what I've learned, can you just let people know where they can support you and your work and where they can follow you? I know you have a bunch of ebooks and courses and things like that, so feel free to let people know how they can learn more from you.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. We have a website called LifeSpa.com, LIFESPA.com, and you can there sign up for our newsletter. There you can browse our organic Ayurvedic store with all our whole herbs and our Ayurveda skincare line, which has all the whole herbs as well in it. We publish a newsletter 3 times a week with some new ancient wisdom, modern science thing. We've got over 1,000 articles and videos at lifespa.com for free, which has kind of an ancient medicinal, topic. And then I write articles about the ancient wisdom and the modern science. We always add the science to it because without the science, I think you can say anything you want on the web, and we really need to have something that is kind of, more well-documented and evidence-based. And there's so much research on the ancient wisdom that nobody knows about, and that's what we write about at lifespa.com. And of course, I'm on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and I post a daily short with a new topic every morning. And that's usually linked to an article where you can go into depth on my website and read the science and really learn more about it. And all that stuff's for free.
Absolutely. Dr. John, thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for your time and all of your insight.
Thanks for having me, Brianna.